In this video we're going to be looking at local rules. Now the rules book has 233 pages at the moment, 33 rules. That's coming down to 24 from 2019 and that covers most things, most courses, but sometimes on a specific course there are things that just need a little bit of clarification via local rules. So local rules will often cover things like out of bounds, what is out of bounds, what isn't out of bounds, course markings, if there's some ground under repair, that will be covered by the local rules. It will also specify any specific abnormal ground conditions at a course that need to be treated in a certain way. You'll have a look on a scorecard typically, and on the back you'll find local rules printed clarifying some of the things about that specific course. Now in the appendix to the rules, Appendix 1, there are a lot of specimen local rules drafted there, and a lot of clubs will just adopt those rules as they are there. Let's just have a little look at one of these cards here. This is for Rootham Heath Golf Club, relatively close to my home. This card, for example, clarifies things about out of bounds. Line of fences bounding the course is out of bounds. Any white stake is out of bounds. Of course, that's the typical out of bounds marker where there's no wall or fence. An interesting one here, the 16th fairway is out of bounds when playing the 13th hole. And actually this card says vice versa, so the same applies the other way around. Some courses you might even have an internal out of bounds where it's only out of bounds one way, because in theory it's particularly dangerous for you to perhaps try and cut that corner. They want to discourage people from doing that. It's not such a problem coming back the other way. So you might find on a dogleg hole there's out of bounds on a fairway or green that you would have to aim over to go directly to the green. This one also talks about stones in bunkers. That's a very common local rule at the moment. You can't move stones in bunkers under the rules of golf. You can only move them if there is a local rule in force. This one has that local rule in force, so you would be able to move stones in bunkers. Ground under repair is specified on here, just telling you the areas marked out with white or blue lines are GUR, and you would get relief from those. Another one that the local rules often have to clarify is what's the status of pathways on the golf course. Sometimes it's just tarmacked or concrete pathways you get relief from, sometimes it's more than that. This one here says all roads and pathways, whether artificially surfaced or otherwise, are immovable obstructions. So at this particular course you would get relief from all roads and pathways. Another scorecard I've got here is for Eyemouth Golf Club. That's up in the borders on the coast there. And this one also talks about distance measuring devices. So you have to remember that at the moment, distance measuring devices, although they are widespread and common and almost universal, they still have to be permitted via a local rule. And you'll find local rules that are effectively permanent at a golf course will typically be printed on the back of the scorecard. Others that may be come and go, you're likely to find on the club notice board. Let's say perhaps a big tree has fallen down on the golf course and there needs to be some temporary local rule to tell you what to do if you find yourself right up against that tree that shouldn't be there in theory. The important thing to note is any golf course you play, you must check the local rules either on the scorecard or on the notice board if you're playing a competition, just to find out exactly what you can and can't do. Certainly with things like stones in bunkers, you play the first hole, pick a stone out of the bunker, find that there is no local rule in force, and you're going to be penalised right from the word go. So another common local rule, perhaps the most common local rule, is preferred lies, winter rules, and that is one that most clubs will play from, I don't know, maybe the end of October to March, something like that. And the idea there is it just makes the game fairer in the winter when conditions can get a little bit less predictable and you're more likely to encounter a muddy or a dodgy lie. Now preferred lies allow you to move the ball, pick the ball up. You must mark the position of the ball first before you do so. You pick the ball up, you're allowed to then place it within a specified distance, and that distance typically would be 6 inches. Some clubs might play a club length. Occasionally you'll see someone that says a scorecard length, and you must place the ball within that specified distance. One thing to remember though, when you do that, if you're trying to be a little bit too ambitious and pop it up on a tuft, if the ball then falls off that tuft after coming to rest originally, you would then have to play it from where it lies. So if you're trying to cleverly use the far end of some sort of pitch mark and the ball rolls back into the pitch mark, I'm afraid the benefit you were seeking to gain is going to be somewhat compromised and you'll end up with a worse lie than you might have had originally. So just be aware of that. Once you've let go of the ball, provided it comes to rest initially, if it then moves after that back into a less preferable lie, something you really didn't fancy, then I'm afraid that is just tough luck and you'll have to play it from there. So with the preferred lies, you have to remember that that is only closely mown areas under the rules of golf. So that would be fairways, fringes of greens, any paths cut through the rough to fairway height. This brings us nicely onto the dreaded embedded ball in the rough. What can you do there? Well, under the rules of golf, I'm afraid you can do nothing at the moment, though the good news is that will change from 2019. At the moment, though, you can only take relief from an embedded ball in the rough, away from the closely mown areas, if there is a local rule in force on it. Neither of my two example courses here is that rule printed on the scorecard, so unless that is a rule that is up on the club notice board, you wouldn't be able to take relief from an embedded ball there, so your only option would be to either play it, try and chop it back out, or take a penalty drop. As I say, that will change from 2019, and clubs can at the moment allow relief from an embedded ball away from the closely mown areas via a local rule. So that's a really important one to check, because I think a lot of golfers actually assume that because it seems so unfair, there must be some rule to allow you relief there. But at the moment, that's not the case. Give it a few months, January the 1st, 2019, and that will be the case. Although clubs will then still be able to outlaw relief via a local rule, but I very much doubt that many clubs will be doing so. Another very common local rule will be GUR, so maybe there's an area that is particularly scrappy at the moment, or for some reason why the Greens Committee don't want you playing from a certain area, and they would mark that area out as GUR, ground under repair, which might be a white line, it might be a little roped fence, and it will either say you either can or must take relief from such an area. And to take relief, you have to find the nearest point where the condition, the abnormal condition as it were, doesn't interfere with your stance, your line of swing, or where the ball is lying, and you then would take one club length from that nearest point of relief. So the thing just to remember there is that in some instances it will be a compulsory drop from GUR, in some it might be at your discretion. I do remember a few years ago when Bradley Dredge was trying to get his game back together, he was playing in a Euro Pro Tour event somewhere and got penalised for choosing to play from an area that was a compulsory GUR drop, so just be careful on that one. Another one we want to look at here is sprinkler heads when they're close to the green, and they often are, aren't they, on the fringes there. Now you get relief from the sprinkler head if your ball is lying on it, it's a immovable obstruction, or if you're standing on it, or if it affects the line of your swing. But you don't get relief if you're wanting to putt from off the fringe and the sprinkler head is right on your line. So I'm afraid there is no relief there under the rules of golf. You'll either have to chip it or take your chances with how it's going to roll through the sprinkler head. However, some clubs do offer additional relief for sprinkler heads, and that will typically be if the sprinkler head is within 2 club lengths of the putting green and your ball is within 2 club lengths of the sprinkler head and it's right on your line, you may take relief then by dropping at the nearest point where the sprinkler head doesn't interfere with the line of your putt. Again, that has to be via a local rule. I think some people would assume there is automatic relief there, but that's not the case. So check the local rules on that one. The final one I want to look at here in this little video about local rules is drop zones. You'll sometimes find those on golf courses, particularly those with a lot of water hazards, where the geography of the layout, maybe there's rocks beside a water hazard or something like that, mean that it's very difficult to take all or any of the standard water hazard relief options. You'll have a little area marked out, typically white lines with a DZ in the middle, something like that. And the drop zone can either be compulsory or optional, so it can be an additional option, and that is what the R&A would prefer, but sometimes you will find committees making that the only option. So if you're in that water hazard, you must drop here. That might be for safety reasons, possibly to discourage people from dropping on very steep banks and potentially falling into the water, which would obviously be bad news. That's it for this little rules video. If you've liked it, please let us know by clicking below. Give us any comments you want. We will happily try to answer them. If you've got any queries about local rules at your place or local rules you've seen. And just remember, local rules, 3 places to look: the back of the scorecard for permanent local rules, if you like, the club notice board for ones that come and go, particularly winter rules, and then if you're playing in a competition somewhere, the organisers will often hand you out a sheet at the start of the day to tell you about specific local rules that apply during that competition. So look out for local rules. Don't assume that everything you think is a rule of golf is a rule of golf, and I'm talking about distance measuring devices and embedded balls there, for example, although that will change from 2019. And don't fall foul of assuming something is allowed when it isn't. So check the local rules carefully and you'll probably keep your score a little more intact.